Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Solfate podcast, where we talk to founders and builders in the Solana and crypto ecosystem more broadly. Today, we talked with Brian Long, who is one of the co-founders of Triton. Holy crap, it was a good conversation.
Wow, so good.
I'm not gonna lie, I'd never met him before. I had no idea what to expect. He is, a phenomenal conversationalist. A lot of fun chatting with, and just incredibly knowledgeable, and has been in the crypto space since basically day one. Like, we're talking 2009, mining Bitcoin on a CPU sort of situation.
Throwback
Super
times.
Awesome conversation.
Yeah. Oh wow, the conversation was so good. Brian is like James said, Brian's been around the ecosystem. He's been running validators and RPCs on Solana since just testnet days, like pre-mainnet launch. So that's just a frame of reference of how long he's been in the ecosystem. And Triton as an organization, like, they're doing so many really great and amazing things. The coolest thing we talked about, I think, is Project Yellowstone. That's one of my favorite things that Triton does. And Project Yellowstone is basically this massive undertaking of projects to improve the Solana RPC layer. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. We talk about the details, from just ingesting so much data and actually storing that data on IPFS via Filecoin, and being able to have that data availability and speed to access data in other ways. And it's incredible engineering feats, running hundreds of servers around the world just to help maintain the Solana blockchain. It's awesome.
Yeah, Triton is doing some crazy things that I had honestly no idea about. And in fact, like, just yesterday was introduced to some of the things that Brian was talking to us about today, and it's all really awesome. So you all will really enjoy this episode. Let's get into it.
Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy.
So yeah, we were doing dry runs, and then finally brought up testnet, and then brought up mainnet. So I've had a chance to kind of see Solana, not from the very beginning, not from Greg's basement, but where they all started. But still relatively early. So it's been quite the ride.
I might just jump right.
I have seen the picture of Greg's basement of them them building the servers for the first validators. Dan Albert showed a bunch of us, and it's a great story.
I might just start off the conversation, like, needling there a little bit with, like, how so early? Like, what was the serendipity? What, who did you meet or connect with that made you be like an original in the Solana space?
It was a mutual friend, and he had talked about Solana and what they were building, and immediately for me it was like, okay, that's what I've been waiting for. And my exposure to crypto goes back to late 2009, early 2010, when I was mining Bitcoin on a CPU. And at the time it was cool tech. People were talking about it. People were saying that, hey, Bitcoin is amazing. You're going to be able to go into a coffee shop and buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin. And so I thought, okay, this is cool. It's a really neat idea. But at 10 transactions per second, no, this is not a global means of payment. And I was kind of right and kind of wrong when I was telling people that Bitcoin is not the future of money, but it's a stepping stone to the future of money. And then my friend was telling me about Solana, proof of history, and how they were breaking through the speed barrier for layer one. And for me, it was immediate. Yes, that's what I've been looking for. I want in. How can I do this? And for me, the way in was to volunteer to run a validator. And that's how I got involved. Yeah. So
that's awesome. It's also super cool that you go far back in the crypto space, the broader crypto space, and that you sort of had a bit of a contrarian view on Bitcoin. Sounds like not contrarian, and that you were like, Bitcoin's not a thing, but in the sense of, hey, this might not be the global payment system that you
It's
guys
not
think
going to
it
be
will
that
be.
breakout moment that everyone was saying it was going to be.
So I might want to go backwards a little bit actually,
Yeah.
and talk about how you arrived at those conclusions early on, because I feel like that's a challenging thing uh, to have thought in the early crypto days.
Yeah. Well, at the time, Bitcoin was being sold as internet money for a coffee shop or for small transactions. And the narrative had to change because that was just never going to work, right? So then the narrative changed to being digital gold, and then it went a completely different direction. So I think the Bitcoin community had just kind of realized that, okay, we need to pivot. And it was the narrative that pivoted. Obviously, the chain hasn't really pivoted a whole lot until recently. So I was reacting to that. I was reacting to the narrative that said, hey, this is coffee shop kind of money. And I think I even remember telling people, it was maybe 2013-ish, that, for me, what I'd love to see is I'd love to see an app on my iPhone where I could send a digital US dollar, not a Bitcoin, not ETH, a US dollar. And now as we jump forward 10 years, we see what's happening today with USDC on Solana, and how fast it is now to do exactly that, right? And, we all have wallets on our phones. We can all send dollars within 1 or 2 seconds. So we did finally get there. Now we just need to get that mass market adoption, right? Get to the billion. Yeah.
That's super cool. The dream you were talking about 10 years ago has happened, right?
Finally.
In fact, just this morning, I received a client payment in USDC on Solana, and in a matter of seconds had sent it to Coinbase, and then off ramp for business reasons.
Yeah.
But which I'd love to feel like I could keep all of my business payments and stuff on chain. That'd be fantastic. But I'm curious, how has your, I mean, it's like 10 years ago, you were saying, I'd love to send a digital dollar, right? And that has happened. That's that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So now I'm super curious to know, like, what's your current dream that hopefully 10 years from now we'll be looking back and saying, like, hey, that's super awesome. Like, this thing that you were talking about 10 years ago has been realized.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's still the same. It's mass adoption. And it's cool that we can do it now, but we're all doing it in pretty small circles, right? So we need to see the size of the circle or the pie start to grow and get beyond just us nerds that are trading dollars with each other and get to the broader community. And that, we're starting to see that happen in some countries, Venezuela, Argentina, where crypto really matters. And we at Triton, we've got some team members who work in Argentina, and we also pay them in USDC. And for them, it's much more stable than their local peso, right? And so, I think what we'll see going forward is mass adoption, but maybe not in the countries or places that you think of first, right? It's going to be places like that, not in America.
Yeah,
100%. So for me, that's it. It's mass adoption.
Actually, while we're on the topic of, I'm curious if you know anything about like the logistics that those employees go through, if they're able to transact with USDC locally, or they have to off ramp it somewhere, or they're able to do everything in crypto. Because I don't have a whole lot of context about a lot of other countries and how they're doing it, because each of the countries that are, I'll say, more adopting crypto, they're doing it in very unique ways. So I'm curious, any insights you have there?
I don't, unfortunately. I don't know how they off ramp. So I'm not sure how that works, but it is easy to see, though, that it's that kind of a climate where, a digital dollar can be extremely valuable to the local community. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have an ecosystem popping up underneath the official ecosystem.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a really good point about sort of the countries that adopt things may not be the ones we think of. Those of us who live in the United States or in Europe, it's easy to hear. It's easy, especially outside of the crypto space, to hear people say like, "Well, I just don't understand why we need this," right? And it's because we have a pretty solid financial institutions. It's by no means perfect, right? Like our financial rails are not perfect, and I do think crypto can make payments cheaper, faster, et cetera. But there are many places in the world where there just aren't financial rails full stop, at least not for your average person, right? And something like Solana makes payments possible in a way that they just weren't before, right? It's like you can get something on your phone in a country that's maybe less developed, where normally you'd have to find like a Western Union branch and pay like 30% of the total amount that you're trying to collect from somebody overseas in order to get access to the money in the first place. Whereas instead you pay a fraction of a penny to send a transaction on, in USDC and you're good. So that, it really is, it's hard to convey the importance of that to someone who hasn't experienced that difference.
Yeah.
But I think there are literally billions of people who are in that scenario where getting money, maybe they have friends and family who are sending them money from a more developed country, and it's outrageously expensive, and there's a massive regulatory hurdle for them to get that money in through traditional means. And we're solving that. So I do think the mass adoption is inevitable in some ways, because it's not just 3% of the world is facing this problem. It's like, no, half-ish, maybe more than half of the world is facing this problem.
Yeah.
We're stuck in our very first world bubble of thinking that it's not a problem when it really is.
Yeah, I do. When people ask me the same question, I do have to remind them that there's a lot of other people in the world that do not have the same freedoms that we have in America. And like you said, even the same financial infrastructure. But when I think of Russia, China, for example, of places where they just don't have the freedom that they want, that yes, absolutely, that there will be alternatives. There are alternatives for them, and we just need to see that part of the ecosystem grow.
Yeah, that's another huge point, right? It's like I was approaching it from a financial infrastructure standpoint, but you're right, even from sort of a political climate standpoint, and what are you allowed to do with the traditional money versus what could you do if you were working outside of that system. Super interesting. So the dream now for you is mass adoption, and I feel pretty confident that 10 years from now we'll look back and think like, oh yeah, we've had so much more adoption, and it makes so much more sense to people now than it did 10 years ago. I'm curious how you view like your role personally in the realization of that dream over the next decade.
Yeah,
like,
for us,
accomplish?
Yeah, for us, and for me, I guess we found a niche on the infrastructure side. So trying to build the infrastructure to support that future and that vision. And where we're at right now is a good start. There's a lot of work to be done to really scale up to that level. And so the RPC infrastructure side, we need a more scalable RPC stack, for example. The software itself it's actually, it's so much better. We just need to acknowledge where we've been, right? With restarts and software that was still really early stage, had a lot of rough edges, but we're way past that now. And so, software improvements, it's easy to get excited about what Firedancer is doing as well. Those guys are brilliant. Their software appears like it's going to be amazing, and that it will make it easier for us to scale up. So that, that's kind of where I'm finding my fit and in my spot right now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
can you? Most of our listeners, I at least think, are developers, and so they might more or less know the answer to this question. But for those who maybe aren't or are less familiar with how all this works under the hood, could you explain where Triton and Triton's products sort of fit in the Solana stack, if you will?
Yeah. So if you are a user of an application, your favorite DeFi application, you're looking at a website or an app on a phone, you're looking at the front end, and that front end needs to talk to the blockchain. And it does that through the RPC services that are essentially the back end. You can think of it as the cloud. If everybody talks about the cloud, right? That's kind of what's happening. Cloud. Yeah. Your front end is talking to the back end, and in a blockchain world, the RPC is the back end, and that back end needs to be able to run fast, effective. Solana is capable of real-time data streaming at a process commitment level, which means you do get instantaneous results, right? Things just happen quickly. And unlike other blockchains where you've got to wait for a certain number of blocks or a certain amount of time, you don't have to do that on Solana. And so, the back end needs to be able to scale up and manage a user base that, will be in the millions and billions. So
let's actually kind of like dive into that, because yes, it needs to be very fast, and Triton is not shying away from that. Like everything that is Project Yellowstone is such a large portion of these efforts that are just making all of these improvements. In fact, I recently just saw the SIMD that Linus had co-authored, I guess, to make some of those improvements and roll it into the core protocol. Can you talk about what is Project Yellowstone and what are some of those, like, because you've told me some of this before when we met in person at the New York Hacker House, and you were blowing my mind of all of the things that is Project Yellowstone. So can you share some of the details of some of the amazing work that you all are doing with that?
Yeah, thanks. And for context, Solana has the Geyser feature. Geyser started out as the Accounts DB plugin. I actually thought that was a horrible marketing name. So I went back to Labs and said, hey, let's do something better here. And so then the name that...
Better than Accounts DB?
Yeah, Accounts DB plugin.
We're trying to go from 0 to 1 here.
We need a better name. And so Geyser was the name that was chosen. And because, Geyser just, if you imagine, instead of spouting water, that it's spouting data. And it's a real-time streaming interface coming out of the validator where we can stream data out and then manage and deliver the data in different ways. So that's Geyser. And then we were building a suite of projects that use the Geyser functionality. And we decided to have an umbrella name called Project Yellowstone for Yellowstone National Park, because that's where all the geysers are, right? And then what we did is
connecting.
Yeah. And then what we did is each of the projects underneath that is named after an actual geyser in Yellowstone. So we pulled up the Wikipedia page for geysers in Yellowstone, and we started picking out the cool names. The Dragon's Mouth, for example, our gRPC plugin is called Dragon's Mouth, and that's the name of a geyser in Yellowstone. So that is a gRPC plugin that traders and other people can use to access and stream data into a backend. gRPC by itself doesn't really work with a web browser, but certainly works for trading bots or any other backend application. And so Dragon's Mouth is, I think, now second or third iteration of the gRPC tech. And what we did is we added subscriptions. So it's a two-way interface, and you can subscribe to a gRPC subscription just like you could a WebSocket subscription. And that we did, it's fully open source. we're encouraging everybody in the community to use it, give us feedback, send us PRs to make it better. But we, that's not proprietary in our minds in any way. That's for the ecosystem. And so that was the kind of the first piece that we did under Yellowstone, is build up the Dragon's Mouth gRPC plugin. So
cool. That sounds awesome.
Not only a phenomenal name and name scheme, but the tech that's powering it all underneath is just so amazing. Like there's four primary projects underneath of Yellowstone right now, right? 4-ish.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. And then we've got some others that are custom cases. The one is called Steamboat, and which is also the name of a ski resort, but it is the name of a geyser in Yellowstone. And so Steamboat is our accelerator for get program accounts. And the what we're doing there is we're building custom indexes specifically for certain programs. And the reason we did that is that we could accelerate the performance of GPA. So one example would be the stake program. Whenever you open a wallet and look at your stake accounts, that particular query triggers get program accounts on the stake program, and then with some filters that get passed in to filter the results that go back to you in your wallet. Runtime for that particular query for a wallet was 2,000 milliseconds on the server. Plus you add in the network latency to and from, right? It's slow, and that's why it always felt slow. But by using custom indexes in the background, we actually made that 99% faster. So it doesn't use the current RPC stack. It uses basically a sidecar database with some custom indexing.
Oh, that's cool.
That's a massive improvement.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing then massive improvement indeed. GPA is hands down the slowest thing of Solana.
Yep.
And so from like the technical side of that, is how you're handling that is basically when people hit a Triton server, a Triton RPC, you catch the RPC method and you just don't send that to the normal RPC. You send it over to that sidecar. Then you can handle all of that stuff that's indexed in like a separate database. Is that like how it works under the hood? Okay.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a routing layer when the request comes in, it hits, there's a request router that will then look to say, okay, what is the request? What are the parameters, and which backend am I going to send this to?
That's cool.
And so we did that. Whirligig, which I thought was the best name ever. Whirligig. And that's the WebSocket interface that is sitting on top of Dragon's Mouth right now. And so it allows you to use just basically a WebSocket interface into the same backend. There's one super cool feature about Dragon's Mouth, so I'm going to pop back to that for a minute. And it's at a process commitment level. So if people are familiar with the 3 different commitment levels on Solana, processed means that the validator has processed the transaction, but it is not yet confirmed. And it's not confirmed by the other validators in the cluster. So you've got processed and then confirmed means that we've had at least 34% of the validators in the stake have optimistically confirmed that this block is valid and acceptable. And then finally, we get to that final or that rooted status where you've got over the 67% threshold. And so with Geyser, when we're streaming data at a process commitment level, we're seeing transactions real time. So as they happen, as they're coming off of the validator, we don't have to wait until the end of the slot. And which the standard WebSocket implementation in Solana, what you do is you get a single account state update at the end of the slot. You don't see what's in the middle. But if you're a trader, you want to see what's in the middle, and because you want to be able to react to that quicker, and get your arb transaction back in as fast as you possibly can to beat your competitors. So so with that coming through Dragon's Mouth and gRPC plugin, that we can then now have that same level of resolution on a web browser. And so what you're getting there is you're getting a real, resolution like you could never get before, and you absolutely cannot get on any other blockchain. Which is really cool. So that's why I like talking about real-time data streaming with Solana, because there's just nobody else that can do that.
Yeah. It's only possible on Solana.
That's right.
So much data so quickly with so quick finality is second to none, really.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy, actually. Like to expose that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of that. Solflare, they're doing some great stuff when you do a transaction in Solflare. They're showing you an immediate response at a process commitment level. And so, the reaction time is instantaneous. Yeah. Yeah. It's so good.
That's way cool.
Yeah. And then we did the other project then called Old Faithful.
Ooh, this one is hands down.
Right? Yeah,
it's the big one that is the hot topic. And yes, please share all the details about Old Faithful, how it works, and how the I guess relationship with Protocol Labs and how that kind of came about. I'm very curious.
Yeah. So and to kind of lay the stage for the conversation, a developer when they're new to Solana. They're starting to learn how it works. They want to start writing some code. They may also be interested in running their own RPC stack. And so they want to be able to spin up an RPC server, learn about that, and then write their application against their own server. What they quickly learn after that is they do not have access to the history. So you don't get access to the full ledger of Solana going all the way back to epoch 0, block 0, right? And that kind of sucks. You should be able to spin up an RPC node on a blockchain and have visibility into the history. That's what blockchains are about, right? And at the moment, that history is in Bigtable, Google Bigtable. And there's only, I don't know if there's 5 or 6 people that have instances or replicas that we're all maintaining independently. And that means that if you want to get the history, you have to go through a gatekeeper. And that kind of sucks that, you shouldn't have to go through a gatekeeper to get to the history that should be there. So Linus Kendall, one of our co-founders, along with Richard Patel, many people know Richie he's on the Firedancer team, amazing engineer. And the two of them were talking in London a year and a half ago at St. Pancras Station. We're just going to call it the St. Pancras meeting because this is where it all started. and they were talking about ways and ideas to make this archive history available and to do it in a way that we could deliver the data at a large scale, because this, Solana has got a lot of data, especially compared to other blockchains. So they did some napkin engineering.
Terabytes right now, something like that.
Yep, currently
and
about 250.
Just on one cluster.
250 terabytes right now is what we've got in the Old Faithful archive. Yeah. So those guys did the engineering work, just napkin engineering, right? To say, hey, if we could do it like this, we could do that. We can use this file format. And then they came up with some great ideas. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve, is that we want to make the history available for anybody in the ecosystem to be able to spin up their own RPC node and get access. Let's see. You had asked about Protocol Labs. So this is kind of where Filecoin enters the conversation, and which is really cool because now we've got 2 layer 1s that are working together. and collaborating in a very positive and synergistic way. So
actually, real quick, do you mind if I set the stage on Protocol Labs? Because
great, yeah.
Most people don't know of Protocol Labs. They know of their I guess I'll call it a product, I guess. So Protocol Labs is the organization that's behind IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which Filecoin is I guess I'll call it the monetary layer backing IPFS. So it incentivizes people to pin that data, to post that data that's uploaded to IPFS, and Filecoin incentivizes them financially to basically serve that data. So the Protocol Labs that's kind of the background on them for those of the listeners that don't know.
Yeah. And so it was a good conversation. I believe it was Richie Patel who said that, hey, we should use IPFS. We should use Filecoin. And there's a file format that he recommended called a CAR file format for archiving. The point being is that it's content addressable. And the reason that it works well with Filecoin is that we can throw a 500 gigabyte file onto Filecoin. And if you need to pull a transaction out of that 500 gig file, you don't need to download the entire file. You can say, I want to grab only these bytes. So there's 1K of bytes in the middle of this file, just send me those. So that means that we can actually get realistic and reasonably good download speeds coming from IPFS. That same format is also available, or works well, I should say, on any S3 compatible storage, because S3 will support an HTTP range request. So you can say, out of this big file, give me these 1K bytes starting here and ending here. And so then by getting all 250 terabytes and growing, because it grows by 500 gig every 2 days, getting that loaded out onto publicly addressable storage like that means that the developer who's trying to spin up their own little RPC node, they don't need to have 250 terabytes or 500 terabytes or a petabyte of storage, because it's already out there in a way that they can access it. And that's huge. That's what we were going for.
Yeah, just let that sit in, let that settle in, listeners. Like, that is such a massive undertaking and is such a lift for the Solana ecosystem that most non-developers won't appreciate that, I think, unfortunately. But I think like any developer, they would think about like the implications of that, and it is huge. This is a massive undertaking, and it's amazing.
It's kind of the linchpin for like the crypto dream, right? Is to have all of this information decentralized, but also easily accessible at the same time. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. And before it's like, and without this, the information still exists. And if you can get access to that information, you can verify, that sort of follow the chain, to make sure it's all accurate. But it's challenging to do, right? Like it's a very non-trivial task. I would never, I consider myself a decent engineer, and I would never undertake that task without a really good reason,
right?
Really good incentive. But to make that possible is huge. Mm-hmm. It's all like, I'll give you an example, right? Like one of the challenges with like state compression right now is that if you aren't indexing compression events as they're happening, you will fairly quickly lose access to those transaction logs, which is where the data actually lives. Mm-hmm. And so it's like it's this weird thing where like, well, it is on chain because it went through the chain and it lives on the chain state somehow, but not in like a readable form.
Right.
And so this is one of those things where it's like, you could go back and say, hey, this is the transaction where it happened. I can look at the logs. I can verify that this compressed NFT actually has the data that it says, independent of the indexing that sort of exists with the DAS API and stuff. So now there's sort of multiple entry points for confirming this or verifying the accuracy and validity of data, which is really awesome.
Yeah. And so this project, we're really focused on the data availability layer, but not the data delivery layer. And data delivery might be where you have performance come into play, to say, okay, great, I've got access, but now I want really, really fast access. And but it's that same file format, since it's so portable, that you could, if somebody wants to download it from Filecoin and put it into a nearby S3 storage, they can do that. If they have a really big data center with petabytes of storage, then of course they could even bring it in local and still access it, the same way. So that's all pretty cool. The one catch though is the index files are pretty big. So
I can imagine.
Yeah. So out of the 250 terabytes right now, there's just over 50 terabytes of indexes. Wow, so it's still not a small lot. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's not a Raspberry Pi kind of thing.
Soon.
So this is I mean, this is just Project Yellowstone, which is already a subset of what Triton sort of works on and delivers to customers. That's a lot of stuff. So I maybe want to pivot a second from the technical and maybe just talk about the organization and the business and the management behind it. Right.
Sure.
I'm curious how many people work at Triton. Like how large is the organization?
Yeah, I think we're at 10. We're spread around the globe.
That's it. 10.
Yeah. We're pretty lean. Spread around the globe. So with 3 different regions. And so literally the sun never sets for us, just like on a blockchain, it never sets. And we've got staff in Europe, South America, 4 people down there. In Asia, we've got Philippines, Thailand, India. And we're very heavy on the DevOps side. So, these are the admins that are keeping the servers running, responding to client requests and things like that. Dev side, we've got Linus Kendall, our co-founder, who's our lead engineer, and then Immaterial Inc. On Twitter. And then also Kirill.
Oh, really? They're at Triton? I didn't realize they were at Triton. That's cool.
And he's actually, he's carrying most of the water and doing most of the work on Old Faithful. So
nice. Yep. That's an insane amount of work for a 10-person organization. How are you guys so productive? Like how do you ship so much?
It's probably about the stuff we don't do as well, because we're a lean team. I don't have a blog that I update every day. There's just a lot of things that we don't do. We're just really focused on taking the standard RPC specification and making it as fast as it can possibly be. At this point, we've chosen not to do extra stuff that sits on top of RPC. So we haven't done any extra indexing. We haven't done any custom APIs yet or anything like that. We're just really, really focused on this one thing. So.
How much of your internal resources go to non-technical business management tasks, like marketing, that sort of
Honestly,
stuff?
it's pretty small as a percentage. We're very heavy on DevOps and engineering, and very light on the other stuff.
Yeah.
So
makes sense. I imagine you have
so
quite literally servers around the world that you're trying to maintain uptime on, plus the databases, plus all of that stuff. So no small feat.
Yeah.
So from like a customer acquisition standpoint, you just feel like if we build the best stuff, if we have the fastest way to get data, people will find their way here by necessity. Is that sort of the philosophy?
That's how it's always worked for us. Yeah. It's been referrals, doing a good job, and then the community is small enough right now that referrals matter, and reputation matters, and that is changing over time. And, we'll see as the ecosystem grows where BD and marketing, need to be much more aggressive than we are today. But historically for us, it's been hard work, do a good job for our customers, deliver a good service, and then they'll refer us to their friends.
Cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in addition to sort of your technical prowess, you have a background in business, right?
Yeah. I'm more of a business guy than a developer. I'm not a trained engineer. I don't have a CSI degree or anything like that. I'm a business guy, and I had to.
But a business guy who was mining Bitcoin in the early days. So like take it with a grain of salt type of.
Yeah. I did have to learn how to code to start my first business, and I picked up a lot of software development along the way. But again, I wouldn't call myself an engineer. I'm just a guy who knows how to write some code.
So it sounds like then you're not too worried about, hey, when the time comes that we do have to focus on business development and that sort of thing, we'll handle it. I know how to do that. I'm not too worried about it. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not the case for everybody in the Solana ecosystem. Like there are a bunch of founders in the space who have never done sort of business management of any kind before. They're devs who are taking their first stab at a business, which I think is awesome. Yeah. But the notion of how to run a business might keep them up at night.
Right.
Where that's not going to be the case for you, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Definitely with a business background, that part, is feel like it's pretty well handled. And we're also a bootstrapped company. So we just, it was 3 guys and, 6 servers, and we went from there.
That's amazing. No, you've had no funding.
No,
no. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's way cool. And
how many servers do you guys have now?
Several hundred. So that ride up and down was just something else. And
I hadn't even thought of that yet. It's like, yeah, of course you were here. You were there from the very beginning and rode the wave all the way up and all the way down.
Yep.
And I mean, whatever you want to talk about in that range, I'd love to hear it.
It was
the emotional roller coaster, the financial roller coaster.
Yeah, it was so insane. And because we took over the mainnet RPC service from Solana Labs, and there were 6 servers running. We had 2 in each region: Asia, Europe, and North America. And that's all we needed at the time, right? It was a brand new network. The first hackathon came through. Step Finance was one of the teams that was in that very first hackathon. And they did their coin launch and absolutely killed the cluster. And so I had a spare validator node. Marco Brukin, one of our co-founders, he's also a validator on Solana. He had a spare node. And that weekend, both Linus and Marco were up the entire weekend, basically moving traffic around the globe wherever they could get a healthy server. And that we moved my spare node into the RPC fleet. We moved Marco's spare node into the RPC fleet. And it was just absolutely insane. But
it sounds so stressful.
But we got it done, right? I mean, so they had a successful launch, and then from there it just kept going and going and going. So Serum started to take off. Certainly the influence of FTX, on that way up. 2020, yeah, definitely. There was that part of it too. Yeah. In 2020, we could not add servers fast enough. And Solana Foundation, with a ton of foresight, pulled together the Solana server program. And what they did is they pre-arranged with a whole bunch of bare metal providers to have servers available for the Solana community. And so we were participating in that program. Genesis Go popped up at that same time. Other RPC providers were starting to come in. And we were basically taking servers out of the server program as fast as they were coming in. And, I remember one weekend, I had basically on an emergency basis, I said, guys, I need 60 servers and I need them by Monday. And it was because there were so many launches going on, and then they got it done. They got the servers for us. We got them online, and we just somehow managed to keep up with the growth and all the traffic that was coming in. And Gen Go was doing the exact same thing. So we were each running 300 or 400 servers at the peak. And this is a network that started with 6 servers a year before. It was just an insane ride. Yeah.
We're running low on time here. I want to make sure that you get a chance, Brian, to talk about what matters to you and your organization, right? So I guess this is the time for me to say, is there anything that you want to shill, if you will, say to listeners, spread awareness about, etc.?
Well, yeah, again, for us at Triton, the focus is taking the standard RPC spec and making it faster. And so scaling, behind the standard API. And then also solving what we think are big problems, like that storage and archive problem. And that's a big deal. And that's what I want people to know about and really care about is, okay, how can we start to integrate and actually get visibility to be able to see the full blockchain and see the full history, and to be able to do it when it's at a petabyte scale. And because it won't be too many years until we're there. The number of transactions we've got today is so much higher than it was a few years ago. And so that's where we're focused as a company and the kind of problems that we're trying to solve. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool.
You are succeeding at solving everything you just said, it sounds like. Thank you so much on behalf of the ecosystem for everything that you guys have built. I was just in a conversation over Twitter yesterday talking about, the custom indexes. So Steamboat, I guess is what it is.
Great.
Yeah, really, really cool stuff. That's something I'm planning to dig into more personally, but thanks so much for joining us, Brian. This has been a fantastic conversation. You have a wealth of knowledge that I would love to dig into further. We'd love to have you on again sometime.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Anytime.
Yeah. It'll be a lot of fun. We'll get a beer together sometime too.
Would love it. You're in Boulder, right? Is that?
Yes. Although at the moment I'm sitting in London.
Okay. But your home base is Colorado. I'm in Utah, so I'm just right next door.
Maybe
great. Meet up sometime for a weekend, go skiing or something.
Nice. Sounds really good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much to the listeners. We'll see you all next time.
Awesome.
And I guess that's a wrap for the day.
All right. Great. Thanks guys. See ya. Bye.